Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Studs. I'm Alex Studd.
And I'm Ron Studd.
And Ron, for episode 52, which is the season finale.
Of season 2.
Season finale.
Right.
We have a very special episode. We're going to go explain the rules, but more or less, we're going to have former guests of the show from the first 2 seasons asking us questions that we have to answer. Now, we've seen the questions, but we have not discussed them together. You and I have not gone through them and said, oh, you say this, I'm going to say this. We have not had any of that preliminary discussion. So hopefully we don't offend each other. We're going to be honest, maybe brutally honest, but it's going to be a lot of fun. You up for it, Ron?
Oh, I'm up for it. You had me at doing a clip episode, right? Like, it's kind of a clip episode, right?
It's an homage to previous guests, but here's the deal. This is new content.
Absolutely.
From those guests. So it'll be kind of fun. You'll get to kind of see from former guests kind of what they're up to now, what they're doing. You kind of see their background. So, but Ron, before we get into this, as you know, we always do this. We got to pay tribute to our sponsor.
Yep.
And I normally we say our guest, but we don't really have a guest tonight.
No.
To all of our guests, I guess to everyone, the whole series, the whole show, the official spirit of Between Two Studs, Jepson's Malort. So cheers to you, brother.
Cheers. And cheers to our guests.
Yeah, you know what? I've had more of this, just kind of for those listening in.
Mm-hmm.
I've been drinking more of this anti-hero Malort, which we talked about with episode 51.
Right.
With Josh Knoll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like it as much as the OG. I just don't. And I like Anti-Hero. It's a great IPA in Chicago. But the two things, I would keep them separate. It's my honest thoughts.
Now, just to be clear on that, too, like, what's the alcohol percent? Is it, like, equivalent to Malort, or is it more, like, closer to beer?
No, it's the same percentage, 35%.
Oh. Huh.
Same percent.
Yeah. I can imagine...
I want to be clear, it is a liquor, but I think they used part of the distillation process using the IPA from...
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Also, a special call out, we've got our audio engineer, Dan, who's helping out with this episode. So cheers, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. And we have a special question from him
as
well that we'll get through. So,
next question, though. We got to talk about what are we drinking tonight, because I know we like to drink Malort. What are you drinking, Alex?
Well, I wanted to get something a little special, not too special. I didn't bring out the Johnny Walker Blue. Okay. And this isn't like the series finale. No. But I am drinking some Glenfiddich 14.
Ooh.
So drinking that tonight.
Very nice.
I'm enjoying it so far. How about you?
Well, tonight I am drinking some Angel's Envy. Something where very, very smooth bourbon. I've never really had like a bad time where I had some Angel's Envy and it was like, it's always just very crisp, very nice, and it's got all the notes that you're looking for, and it's just very smooth and just has great taste. So I figured, what better way to have our episode 52 season finale? So I am all set for that.
Love it. All right, Ron, we're ready to dive in.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go through each one of these questions from former guests, one at a time, and these are in alphabetical order based on their first name. We didn't know how to start, and so that was the best way to do it. So, buckle up, Ron. This is sort of our Ember round. Buckle up. All right. Question number 1. From Andrew Chisholm from episode 46.
Between Two Studs, what is the one thing that you have learned from your podcast that you now have incorporated into your life, daily routine, or how you go about life, or have looked up more and become a fan of?
You know, that's a great question, Andrew.
Yeah.
As I was thinking this one, the only thing there was 2 things I thought of. One, in my job, I I have a lot of meetings both internally and externally with customers. I think I've done a better job of being able to really just listen in and feel like I'm, sometimes I think, and if you listen to the earlier episodes of me, I think I'm sort of just like asking questions like, oh, okay, thanks for that. And then I ask the next question. And then they answer that and then I ask the next question. I think I've gotten a better job of just being able to say, oh, okay, you said that. I'm going to ask a follow-up and just, and kind of, I don't know, I guess I've become a better interviewer, I think. And I think that has actually helped me in my personal career, like in my work career outside of this. The other thing that I think I've learned, Ron, is, I don't know, I think I've become more open to just asking people and saying, yeah, do you want to be on a show? Like, I think I've become a little less timid about this project. And I think it's actually been, generally speaking, people are very receptive to it. People might feel uncomfortable being on a podcast, but I think I've become less shy as it relates to chatting about my personal projects, in this case, the podcast.
Yeah. For me, I think sort of similar in some ways to like what you said, at least the beginning part, right? Where I think one of the things that this show has kind of helped me to see is really a lot of the complexity with everyone's career, everyone's job, everyone's passion, right? Like there's so much complexity to it. And I think what's kind of cool with that is it's made me probably a better conversationalist, being able to say, oh, well, what are some of those things that got you into that? Or why are you passionate about it? Or how does that relate? And then that kind of, to your point, dovetails in with the idea of like, hey, if you would ever be interested in being on the show, we do have a podcast. Like I was talking with, there's a gentleman that that goes to my church. He was talking to me about some of his background and life experiences. And I'm like, as he was kind of telling me all of this, it was like leading into that in some ways. So I think that's kind of helped me as well. I think in terms of like individual points or things, biggest thing I would say that I'm sure many of our listeners have taken this away. Sign up for those frequent flyer, the point systems. I think that we've maybe killed that, but at this point, if you don't, there's no excuse to not. So there's definitely a lot of cool perks.
It's free.
Right.
It's free.
All right. So we'll go to our next question. So this is from Andrew Weatherall from episode 24.
Hey, Alex and Ron. Greetings from Costa Rica. So with 2 years under your belt, I think you can now officially be considered content creators. So my question to you is, how has this experience changed the way you view content creators today and kind of the industry that's built around just creating anything online?
I think for me, the biggest thing that I've learned is I certainly respect all the work that goes in with the editing. I think the other side of it too is that you do really appreciate the people that have kind of really built up their audiences, and then also the passion that you have with those audiences, right? Where it's cool how you can really get to know a group of people who I think that, it's weird where, okay, let's say if I'm putting out a movie, right? You've got this huge budget and the budget kind of stops and ends with that. I think what's cool about a lot of creators is that you can have an ongoing kind of conversation and dialogue that really evolves and changes with everyone as you learn and as you grow. And I think that that's maybe one of my big takeaways as well. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, it's a really great question that kind of gave me some pause because, I don't mean to quote Spider-Man, but there is a sentiment where anyone can create anything nowadays, and it can be accessible by anyone. So there is that great power comes great responsibility. There really is a little bit of that. Now, we don't talk about anything overly controversial, but everyone now has access to a microphone, which is something to celebrate, but it can also be very scary. I will say this. I have a whole new level of respect for content creators because I honestly think we could make this a full-time job. I really do. I think you and I could, between sourcing talent, going on the road and meeting new people and doing mini-series, mini episodes with random people. And, there are so many things that we're not doing that if we were to make a career out of this, which I don't think we ever would, but we could do, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it just goes to show you how much effort goes into this. So I think I have a new level of respect for content creators, but I pause and say, but content creators, they do or they should have some level of responsibility to what they're saying, because I can't regulate a 6-year-old from listening to this, right? So I do think there's some responsibility that needs to be had. Question number 3 from Brandon Mahoney.
Studs, thank you so much for letting me be a part of your podcast. My question for you, what have you both learned about each other while going through this project together? I'd love to hear it.
This is going to sound negative, and I don't mean it to be, but it is funny just getting to know your brother in a project setting that is, a project setting. You and I have never worked. We've never really. I mean, we did actually work at a company together briefly, but we never really interacted with each other. Mm-hmm. Ron, you are an incredibly hard worker. You're also a procrastinator. Mm-hmm. And we would. So Ron does all the video editing. So kudos to that, because that's the bulk of the work that we're talking about. But Ron, we were doing the episodes on Tuesdays, then it became on Wednesdays, then it became Thursdays. Now I think it's Fridays. So I get it. I get it. We all, again, to the point earlier, this is a hobby, right? So I think you're a little bit of a procrastinator, but one of the things that I think has been really cool, getting to know you a little bit better, is through the guests that you've brought on. Mm-hmm. And I realize there's a whole level of nerdiness that I don't know about you, that I've gotten to enjoy by meeting the other guests that you brought on, that you know.
Right. Well, even then, too, I know one of the side things was you talking with Dad. So specifically in our episode with Ryan Christ, where we got talking about Tolkien, and then we talk about Herbert with Dune, and we definitely went into a very nerdy space.
And I don't know that. That is a space that's I know Tolkien did Lord of the Rings, mm-hmm. right? I know that. But to get into, I know we had to kind of for the final edit, is not necessarily where it could have gone down. That could have been a full feature conversation,
probably.
And so kudos, because you have interests that just go way outside my knowledge, mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of cool. But it's just something. I think that's just naturally when you're with friends. Mm-hmm. Anyone you kind of know what their interests are, and so you kind of know. I have certain friends that I talk to about certain things. So mm-hmm. I think there's some level of the deepest levels of nerddom that I'm like, whoa, I didn't even know you got that deep. I didn't know you got that nerdy.
Oh yeah. And I think for you, Alex, I think one of the big takeaways I've had has been how much you've really embraced Chicago. I can tell that there's so much about the culture of Chicago, the guests that you've brought on. You've definitely, especially too, because you moved there right around the time of the pandemic. You weren't there for that long, right?
6 months before the pandemic.
Right. But, you've definitely brought on a lot of great guests. There's been a lot of discussion, and then just embracing of Malort, embracing of other things in Chicago. I think that even when we brought on guests about Chicago, and we've done our Ember round, as well as the quick question round, we've had a lot of really great discussion about even the food and the culture of Chicago area. And I think that's been a really cool thing to see as well. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I think Chicago, as a guy who's not from Chicago, it's mm-hmm. the melting pot of the Midwest, right? That's the biggest thing I've come to. And so it's it's a little bit of everything from all over the Midwest, which has a very unique culture that I think a lot of people just see it as flyover states, right? Mm-hmm. You have the coasts, and then it's kind of oh yeah, there's that city in the middle. They have a deep dish pizza, right? It's well, there's actually a really, really rich history that that I've certainly fallen in love with. So,
for sure. All right, our next question comes from Brian Palady. So that was episode 33.
Hey, Alex and Ron. I was wondering, what was the point in your lives where you realized you weren't just brothers, but you were also friends?
That's a really sweet question, Brian.
I like it too. It comes from an awesome place, and I just love it because I don't think we've really actually ever answered it, anything like it on 52 episodes. I would say for me, I think it was 2 times. And I'm sorry for taking 2 points, but
there was 2 moments.
There's 2. One was at a Real Big Fish concert with Alex, and I think you probably remember this. This was in Rehoboth, and
I was going to say which one,
right?
Yeah.
So the mosh pit there was going a little crazy. And by a little, it was a lot crazier than usual. And I remember at the time, Alex was several years younger, so he was actually much shorter. And I remember being the bigger brother, trying to kind of make sure that he doesn't get killed, because you maybe were like 11 or 12 at the time. And, it was also just realizing that, he wasn't just my younger brother who was just saying, hey, I just like this because you like it. He was there for enjoying it for what it was. And maybe you were a bit older, but there was that, like going to a show with you, which thankfully now when we go to shows, I don't have to worry about, you're just as tall as me. So we are totally good with that. But one of the other things too, I think, was taking you to like some of our anime conventions. Like back in the day, we used to go to anime conventions. And I think as we got I haven't gone in a while, but we had a really cool dynamic where we had unfortunately one of our friends passed, but we brought on Drew, right? He was one of the episode guests. So Drew is kind of like our super nerdy guy, really nice, heart of gold. I love him. The other guy we had was he unfortunately passed. His name was Adam, and he was even more nerdy, like just the nerdiest guy. Cosplay, everything.
And this was these conventions we went to. It was his Christmas and Easter rolled.
It was everything. So he did an awesome job with it. But the cool part about him and the cool part with Drew and even with me is you didn't have any of the like neckbeard, actually kind of guys that would just kind of like cut in and be jerks about things, right? But like Adam was a walking like Wikipedia. So he'd be like, well, actually, this guy was on this, and did you know this? And then I think Alex was kind of like the straight man of the group. So like, if we had to go somewhere or whatever, Alex had kind of more of the casual interest, but you kind of helped balance us all out and kept us from getting into too much trouble. I think we did even have the one guy actually more than one of us have gotten booted from the convention for being drunk. So, but I think that those are the kind of things where you wouldn't be there unless you were there, I think more as a friend, not just a brother, right?
It's funny. The anime conventions, that was going to be my answer, but for a different reason. Because actually both times what you indicated, it was from the perspective of, oh wow, my brother has genuine interest in these topics, these subject matters. He's not just doing it out of obligation. So therefore, there's a level of camaraderie that goes outside of the brotherhood. That's how I'm interpreting your answer. What's interesting from my perspective is, again, I was 8 years younger than Ron, right? So for those listening, when I'm 12, Ron's 20, right? So there is a huge difference in terms of age breakdown. And so when you're younger, and maybe this was me having an imposter syndrome or whatever, but there's a natural feeling of, well, he's inviting me to these things out of sort of an obligation, right? And so because of the obligation component, that's in my mind what I was envisioning. Therefore, it is a brotherly activity, right? The obligation, family is an obligation. Doesn't have to be, but it is, right? So I think all of a sudden when I'm in my late teenage years, you don't owe me anything, if that makes sense, right? Like you're on your own. It's not like mom and dad are saying, well, make sure you invite Alex, right? It wasn't like that. And so when you are inviting me to activities with your friends, I think at that point it was like, oh, like he genuinely wants to hang out with me. And maybe that sounds sad, but sincerely for me, that was like, oh wow, like we're friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's no sense of obligation attached to this. That's when it became like, oh, we're friends.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Good question. Good question, Brian.
For sure.
All right. Next question from Chris Goff of episode 42.
So, here's the question I have. When did your last name get you into trouble? Love to hear from both of you.
I have a good answer for this, other than, for me, back before everyone got reservations online, if you called a place to get a dinner reservation or anything like that, I think there's always this level of like, oh, you think you're cool, like Alex Stud for two, right? A dinner reservation. My email address is almost my entire career has been a stud at whatever company I've worked for. So I usually get these like snide, like people thinking I'm trying to be clever, and I'm like, no, like I'll show you my license. Like this is legitimately my name. I haven't had any issues where I got into trouble, although there is a funny story that I feel like I have to bring up that has nothing to do with my last name. It has to do with my first name. And Ron, I don't know if I've ever told you this story. So in 9th grade, I was in gym class. I had gym in Middletown High School, and we had our lockers, right, that we got changed between before and after gym. Anyway, we all had a locker buddy, and my locker buddy was a guy named Alex Locker. No joke. So this became an Abbott Costello scenario one day where, unfortunately, and I remember it was a devastating day in my life. It was January 10th. I'll always remember it. Somebody stole, they broke into a lot of the lockers and stole stuff. And so I had an iPod, and it got stolen. I remember being so upset about it. What is mom and dad going to say? This iPod got stolen, blah, blah, blah. And I remember having the chat with the administration. They were like, well, so what's your name? I'm Alex Stud. And you have a locker, and you share a locker with who? Alex Locker. No. What's the locker? Who's your? No, his name is. I know my name is Alex. His name is also Alex. And yes, it is a locker, but his last name is Locker. And it was. This went on for like 5 minutes, but we eventually got it figured out, and that'll always stick out in my memory, probably the rest of my life. Just a weird scenario. Anyway, what about you? What have you run into any troublesome scenarios with our last name?
No, it's been kind of like a good thing, knock on wood. Like there really hasn't been any problems with it. The only thing I can think of remotely comical was back in college. I remember my freshman year, my roommate's last name was Wang, and the guy right next to us, his last name was Johnson. So you put a Stud, Wang, and a Johnson all right next to each other. I was pretty sure the residence life had a fun time with that one. Because we were all Stud, Wang, Johnson, and it's just like, all right, somebody had fun. So that was it. But good question, Christopher. All right, so our next question comes from Cortland. So he's from episode 19.
So, you're entering into a competition to win $500,000, and you have to cosplay as a particular character. The caveat is you have to compete as that character and then spend 24 hours in your regular life as that character. Who do you pick, and knowing that you're trying to win this $500,000?
Well, I've got the easy one here. Maybe it's because I'm lazy. Snorlax. I will do Snorlax for 24 hours, right? Just be in that big suit, just sleep, not do anything. I think I could do it. I could do the whole character thing, right?
You could do that very successfully, Ron. I think so.
Right? What about you?
All right. I thought about this one, Cortland. This one is the nerdiest question of the bunch, and I love it. My answer, Ron, you might get a kick out of this.
Okay.
I decided on Slurms McKenzie from Futurama.
Yeah.
All right. So here's what I thought about. Slurms McKenzie, if you're not a fan of Futurama, he is this over-the-top, super excited party guy. He loves the party. He wears a Hawaiian shirt. And what you find out about him, though, is he is exhausted. Because people just want him to be party guy all the time. Party. Wimmy, wham, wham, wazzle. Right? And I love being that guy. But I can relate to this idea where I have friends sometimes that just think like, oh, Alex, come on, you gotta keep being the fun guy, the guy who's jumping up and down and making noise and celebrating and all that. Sometimes I'm like, I'm just really tired. But I think I could play this guy. I think I could absolutely drink what essentially is Mountain Dew all day for 24 hours and be party, Andrew WK style, and randomly throw out "Wimmy wham wham wazzle" once in a while. I think I could do that for 24 hours.
I love it. Great question, by the way, Cortland. All right, our next question comes in from Mr. Daniel Taylor. So Daniel has been our audio engineer, and he's actually live with us tonight, so thank you, Daniel.
Hey guys, Dan here, part-time audio engineer for Between Two Studs. I've gotten to know you guys fairly well over the last year or so, especially Ron. That's how I got in touch with you guys. I had some trouble thinking of a question for you, but I finally came up with one of my favorite hobbies is gaming. And what would you guys say is your favorite game? And on top of that, have you ever thought about doing Between Two Studs streaming?
So yes, I know that we definitely both game. Different types of gaming too. So I know that there's like two different types of gaming, right? There's video gaming, and then there's also like board gaming as well. And we both do both, right? So in terms of like doing like board gaming, one of the things that we used to do, and it's been a while, we used to do a ton of every Sunday night, and it is Sunday night when we're recording this. I used to have a bunch of folks over to our house, and we would actually just call it game night, right? And that actually started from we were going over to Buffalo Wild Wings once a week. And I think we realized for trivia night, it was like starting to add up. And we're like, you know what? Just bring a 6-pack of beer. We'll play some games. We'll order some food. And so we played like Settlers of Catan. We played just tons of different games. And we kind of varied it up. So like we've got some games that are strictly like luck and just random happenstance. And then you got more strategic. And then you got more of the trivia. I mean, you name it. So that it was never like a completely anyone had, clear domination over everything.
And it was fun. There'd be like 6 or 8 of us. And I think for me, what I enjoyed about that part was there was, that sort of Sunday scaries. I get Sunday scaries.
Yeah.
Where, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got to work tomorrow and I got to get up early. And so all of a sudden it was like, I know Sunday afternoons for most of my life I already get that feeling. Mm-hmm. Right? Usually after a Bills game, I'm already starting to feel that like, I celebrate for a quick moment and then, and somehow it was like, oh, yeah, but there's something else going on tonight. And that was like something that was fun. And that, I know I'm kind of double playing this, but that also was an opportunity, I think, where I realized we were friends because I was in college, up, 45 minutes, half an hour up the road, and you didn't have to invite me. You could have had those game nights, and I would have never even known about it. But this is before Snapchat and Instagram and all that. I wouldn't even know that you were having these. The fact that you always invited me, I think, was like, oh, wow, like, he wants me to hang out. And they were mostly your friends.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun. And then I know we also both play video games together. I don't really play first-person shooters. I'm actually sort of decent at them, but I kind of find, at least more recently in terms of gaming, I tend to be stuck on a lot of open-world games. So games like Metal Gear Solid 5, I still play that, even though it's old. Grand Theft Auto 5, definitely even like Cyberpunk, and then also Elden Ring. I haven't beaten Elden Ring yet, but I'm like at that last boss, and I need to still beat Millennia. But I'm totally into games as well. I think my issue is I saw a good comic about it, or it's a good meme, right? From the one like Finding Neverland, where the little boy's crying after the guy's like consoling him. It's like you get to be an adult. You can get any video game you ever want. You just have no time to play it, and that's kind of the the thing, but
it's so true. It's so true. For me, I remember growing up, I was really into SimCity, really into Age of Empires, really into Warcraft 3, really loved RTSs.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I got older, I really got into kind of the open world that Ron's talking about. Really like the Fallout series. If I had to pick, I think Dan's actual original question was, what's your favorite game? So I should have answered that question. I think, gun in my head right now, I would say Red Dead Redemption 2.
Ooh, good choice.
I love that game. I can play that anytime. Same makers as Grand Theft Auto.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, Dan, the second part of the question was about streaming.
Right.
We have never thought about streaming, as far as I know. Ron and I have never discussed it.
I love it.
I wouldn't be against it.
For sure.
I'm not sure how many people would listen in. Because Ron and I have also talked about doing live episodes, right? And streaming it live. I don't know how many people. I think one of the beauties of a podcast is people can listen in whenever they want, right? Like, Dan, you told us earlier that you listened to one of our episodes while you were mowing the lawn, right? I think that's the beauty of podcast. Would someone watch Ron and I stream a game? I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun. I'd like to.
I think it'd be fun. We should probably try it at some point. I like to.
Yeah. Maybe.
Dan commented, he described Red Dead Redemption as Cowboy GTA, which
I agree.
is true.
That's a great way to say it. You know what? I think because we're going to take obviously a pretty lengthy break after season 2, and maybe we kind of throw that out there as sort of we experiment with a couple of these things where, hey, we're gonna randomly do a streaming of a video game, whatever, right? Join in, right? And guess what? If no one else shows up, at least you and I can hang out.
Yeah, that'd be fun. We could do that. Very good question.
All right.
Thank you, Dan.
Next question from Ed Cisse, who was episode 17. I know it's audio only. I think he was traveling. He might have been driving when he recorded this.
It was an absolute pleasure being a part of season 1. The one question that I have for both of you is, what's the best moment from a Bills tailgate that you could tell to the podcast?
For me, the easy answer is to point to Pinto Ron. Pinto Ron is a legend, and if you don't know who he is, just YouTube him, Google him. He's a legend amongst legends. I think though what has been, and by the way, when you're tailgating with Pinto Ron, it is a crazy currency or it's a totally different universe where like beer serves as a currency and everyone knows everybody second or third hand. It's like, oh, you grew up in Olean? Well, I grew up in Cuba and you grew up in Salamanca and I knew your second cousin. And, like there's this weird symbiosis that's happening. But I think actually my favorite part has been tailgating with the other fans that like make their way to the Bills camp, and they're always a little intimidated at first. They're always like, well, I don't know, I've heard about these Bills fans, and are they going to boo us? Are they going to be mean? Are they going to boo whatever? And before you know it, there's a whole group of Bills fans that are handing them a beer, says, hey, welcome to Western New York. I hope you're having a great time. Let's take a shot together. And I don't know how many times, every time I've ever gone to a Bills tailgate, the other team fans will come up to me and say, I travel all the time. You guys are by far the most hospitable, friendly, nicest fans, people we've ever met from the opposing team. And win or lose, to me, that is the win, right? Like people came to Western New York and walked away being like, that's a great part of the country. And I'm going to go back to wherever I live and tell people how great Western New York is. That's a victory to me.
Yeah. So I haven't done nearly as much tailgating as Alex has with Bills games, but I would say for me, I will point to Pinto Ron, specifically him having a shot of Malort. This was something that will actually, as part of the episode art, or not, maybe not episode art.
We have the photo.
Yeah, we'll put something with that with Instagram, and we can maybe even tag him with that. So that was a fun experience because, Malort, for all of our guests that have had it and even those that haven't, it certainly is a very polarizing drink. And here we thought, I had one of these little bottles and I thought, let's give it
little jiggers.
Right. Let's give it to Pintaron, see what he thinks. Right. Well, dude just opens it and he's like, yeah, why not? He just drank it and he's like, it's not bad. It's not bad.
Oh, yeah. My favorite part about that whole story was you gave him this, mysterious liquid. He didn't know what was in it. And I was sort of expecting him to be like, oh, thanks. Like, this guy is a legend, right? Like, if you're a Bills fan, generally speaking, you know who this is. This is a guy who probably gets a lot of strange things from Bills fans all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I was this guy, if I would just take stuff from people.
Right.
But sure enough, he goes, oh, cool. Can I have it right now? Like,
sure.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, we got to get a picture of this. So that was hilarious. We brought a little bit of Chicago to Pinto Rob.
Yeah. All right. Our next question actually comes from James Tarani. So this was from episode 38.
Hey, studs. This is James Tarani and Oreo the dog from episode 38. We want to know, after we discuss the litter challenge, have you been picking up a piece of litter every day?
So, admittedly, I have not. There has been definitely some times where I've thought about it more, but I have picked it up a few times. I will totally admit to that. Just not nearly as much as I should, especially when I go out and I see it when I'm running and I'm like, oh, I should get it, but then I'm like, I don't have gloves, and there's, I think, a lot of trucker bombs that kind of get stuck on the side of the road that I'm like...
It's a trucker bomb.
So that's where, like, if you have, like, a, I don't know, small bottle, like a 20-ounce drink, right?
Oh!
And you pee in it because you don't have a real bathroom to go to, throw it aside, that's a trucker bomb, right?
That's a real known name. I never heard that before, trucker bomb.
We'll have to have Dan, our audio engineer, double-check that. But I'm pretty sure that if you look up, like, as a term, trucker bomb,
sense.
I think that's what it is.
It makes sense. I'm not discounting it. I just never heard it before. Yeah, that I wouldn't want to pick that up either. James, I do probably I don't run like Ron, but I'm walking to get from point A to point B everywhere I go, right? Because I'm right in the city and I don't have a car. I'm definitely way more, because of your show, or because of you being on the show, I am way more cognizant of trash. I will admit, though, like Ron, normally what I'll do now, before our show, if I saw a piece of trash, normally I just walk right by it. I hate to say it, I would. Now, I see a piece of trash, I'll look around and see if I can see a trash can easily accessible nearby. Like, oh, I see one right at one block up. I'll do it. But no, James, you are the MVP, doing it every day. You're doing God's work. Keep it up. But I think you would say, if you were here right now, if everyone can just do a little bit more,
right?
A little bit more, which I think Ron and I have done a little bit more. I'm not like patting us on the back, but if everyone can do a little bit more, then maybe we'll live in a less dirty world. So, challenge not only to Ron and me to step it up more, but anyone who's listening tonight, be like James Tarani. Pick up your trash. Pick up other people's trash.
So we did hear back from Dan, too, for those that are interested. So he did confirm there is a definition for it. It's a plastic container, could be a milk jug or water bottle, that a trucker urinates in while he is driving on his or her truck, that he or she throws out the window so that they do not have to stop and relieve for the call of nature. Can also be a plastic bag, and feces may be involved. So, yeah. Learn something new every day, right?
Now we know. Good to know. Thank you. Next question comes from Matt Toll, episode 4.
My question is for both of the Stud brothers. If you could interview any U.S. president, living or dead, who would it be?
Matt, he knows how to get to me because I love American history, love U.S. history, U.S. presidential history. I thought a lot about this one. I think for me, it has to be Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, to me, is one of the most fascinating human beings of all time. Certainly one of the most fascinating Americans. here this guy was so conflicted throughout his life. Certainly a flawed man, no doubt about it. Writing the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal, yet owning slaves. He lost his wife, refused on her deathbed, promised her he would never remarry. Had children with one of his slaves. There's a lot of debate with whether that was really a relationship or not. But this was a man who did everything. I mean, he was an artist. He was an interior decorator. He was a politician. He spoke many different languages. He actually went broke in large part because he had such expensive taste for French wine that he was importing from France at the time. And when the War of 1812 burned down the original library in Washington, D.C., he donated his private collection to Washington, D.C. He had a huge fight with John Adams, another U.S. president, and they rekindled in the last couple of years of their lives. And a lot of people know this. They actually died on the exact same day, on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence being signed. They both died on the exact same day. Anyway, the story of Thomas Jefferson, deeply flawed, but incredibly powerful. And both Republicans and Democrats today, both of them, will cite Thomas Jefferson, which is very ironic because, you think about the Democrats and Republicans are so polarizing, yet they both pull from Thomas Jefferson, who really was a fighter of the people, so to speak. He was really kind of the antithesis of an Alexander Hamilton, who I know has gotten very popular over the last few years with the musical. But Alexander Hamilton was very much about a large central government. We need a little bit more of an aristocratic rulership because the average Joe, we're not intelligent enough to make decisions for ourselves. Thomas Jefferson was a champion of a lot of those rights. So again, deeply flawed individual, but I would love to pick that guy's brain, interview him. And the last thing I'll say about him, because I'm sure people are already losing steam with Thomas Jefferson, but there was an interview, and don't quote me on who it was. I want to say it was John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was talking to his cabinet, right? And the story goes along the lines. He said, this right here, this collection of people might be the smartest, most intelligent group of people that have ever been assembled in one room in the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. So clearly, even someone of John F. Kennedy's intellect recognized the intellect of Thomas Jefferson, how important he was for American history.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I was actually going to pick him as well prior to you even going into that.
Oops.
Yeah.
Oops.
So now I'm going to have to go for another president, which makes it tough because I think that there's a few that are out there that I love, like FDR, Teddy Roosevelt as well. But I think the person who I'm going to land on is going to be Washington. And I think the thing about George Washington is just that, yeah, he was the first president. I know, yes, there was technically other presidents before him, but I think the thing that I would be most interested in is getting his perspective on where we are today as a country, how that kind of relates to even what the founding fathers originally thought, and also kind of getting some insight into his views on politics today, as well as also what are some of the things that maybe he'd be proud of? What are some of the things that he'd be like, wow, we really kind of missed the point here? Because I think that's a weird thing where a lot of times I think the founding fathers definitely kind of gets thrown in as oh, well, what would they think? How dare we do X, Y, or Z? But it's used by both sides. You'll see this is completely, everything's gone astray. This is not. I also respect the heck out of anybody who made their own whiskey. That's impressive. And I just think that as a president, I think that there's probably a lot more to him. Certainly was a great man, but I think that there was probably also some really deep personal sides to him that would have been really interesting to have conversation with. So that's who I'd pick.
Well, and a lot of Americans view him as, you may have heard this term, the American Cincinnatus. And Cincinnatus, if you remember from season 1,
right? You talked about them.
Finale was a Roman general that I embody, that I look up to myself, respect. And George Washington had a very similar manner. He did not want to be president.
No,
I think honestly, that is something we need more of in this country, in the world, is people who are serving out of public service, not because they want to be a politician. And I think Washington is a great example.
All right, great question. Our next question comes in from Paul Pistori.
Hey, Ron and Alex, this is Paul. I want to congratulate you on your second season, going into your second season on your podcast. So, what's the biggest lesson you've learned since you started producing your own podcasts? Is that a good question?
I think for us, this is tough because I think like there's a lot of ways that we can answer this. I think for me, one of the big things has been we learn and adapt and we grow as we build it. Like I think our season 1, our first episodes, we kind of just had like a really loose kind of idea about like, here's what I think we're going to do. Here's how the episode went. And for like this season, we've kind of built out our Ember round. We have like our quick questions, even like going to Riverside, which is the platform we use for our video now. I think that there's just gradual incremental, lifestyle improvement kind of things that we're getting out of producing the podcast. Even learning with editing, I'm getting better. I think had I gone back and tried to re-edit some of the first episodes, I'd probably pick up a lot. But so I think that's been a big gradual progression, has just been learning and growing. And I think some of that too has kind of helped us as well with kind of figuring out where we want to go with it. Like, I know Dan, our audio engineer, actually mentioned he really liked our Ember Round audio little soundtrack, that we've got like a little blip for that. And it's like, there's a lot of things like that I think we're going to continue to work on. And I think that's maybe been something I've learned from producing the podcast, is that there's always room for improvement and there's always ways to grow. And it's a fun challenge because I think we're both learning and we're both growing as we're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, as I kind of talked about earlier, it's amazing what you can make with a podcast. It is very much a creative outlet for Ron and I. And we've talked about that before, where this has sort of been work during the day. We have busy lives. For most of the show, I've been a student, right? Ron is a father. Right? We're both very busy people, just like everyone else. And so when you have this time and it's a creative outlet, it can be a lot of fun, but it can also be pretty exhausting. And so I think the biggest lesson I've learned is don't expect perfection, but hope to create entertaining content. And even if your fan base, your listener audience is small, if you're bringing happiness to anybody, if there's anyone who's listening who's going, yeah, I resonate with that, I dig that, I like that, I think that's really cool. I really do. And I know we've talked about it before. This is content that will live in the ether somewhere, and it will long outlive all of us. So I think that's cool. But don't expect perfection. Every episode, Ron and I go, oh, well, the audio's a little wrong, or we could have done this, or I know me, I'm listening and I go, oh, I should have asked that. That's okay, right? You learn, and hopefully you get better. Yeah. Next question from Ruben Denaudi, fan favorite. He was our first guest ever on episode 3. And if you remember, he was the one who hosted episode 26, which was our season 1 finale.
Yeah. What's up, Alex and Ron from Between Two Studs? I got a question for you. It's Chop Champ Ruben Denaudi here. If you could do one drug right now, what would it be?
So I'm going to quickly give my PSA. Between Two Studs does not advocate, support, promote any use of illicit, illegal drugs. We do not. All right? But in this question, if Ruben, I'm going to make some assumptions in this. If Ruben is asking, and more or less implying this would be a scenario where you're protected, you're in an isolated universe where there's no negative consequences, there's no habit-forming consequences, no overdosing. That's my assumption to Ruben's question. Okay. So if this, and no consequences of jail time going to, any legal issue. Mm-hmm. All right. If that is the case, I have two thoughts. One, some type of hallucinogenic, mostly because there have been so many brilliant people in this world, like a Steve Jobs, who have made these assertions that it is mind-altering. Even if just taking it once, you will have a different perspective on humanity, on others. You can become more empathetic. You can kind of piece together aspects of your brain that have never that were never connected previously, and I think that's intriguing. The other option, and this is, I remember, you know me, Ron. Everything I tell you is a story. I remember after Prince died. Remember Prince? Yeah. When Prince died, he was one of the first people that like when he died of fentanyl. That was one of the first times anyone had ever heard the term fentanyl, unless you're really into the drug scene. Yeah, people are like, "Whoa, what's this fentanyl?" And people are lacing heroin with fentanyl, and it's 50 times stronger. And, oh my God, it's scary. People are overdosing, and it is scary. I am not minimizing it. I would never touch that in a million years. However, in this scenario that Ruben has given us an open window to, I remember Prince died, and I was watching CNN. They brought in this guy. He was like a PhD in narcotics or whatever from some university, and he was a researcher, and he was a former drug addict. And they were like, Dr. So-and-so, what is fentanyl like? And you could see this guy, he lit up, and he goes, well, let me tell you something. He goes, imagine laying down in a bed of flowers, having the greasiest, best cheeseburger in your life, and having simultaneously a full body 6-hour orgasm. All three of those things simultaneously. Now, if that isn't the worst anti-drug I've ever heard of, like I'm literally watching CNN when this happens, and I'm like, I kind of want to do some fentanyl, And
you don't want no part of this. I kind of do.
Yeah. Obviously, don't do it. Seriously, again, PSA, I mean it sincerely. But to answer Ruben's question, it would either have to be hallucinogenic or that. Yeah, I mean, some type of ridiculous 6-hour full body orgasm laying down in a bed of flowers eating a cheeseburger. That sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I love it. Dan, our audio engineer, he chimed in because he gets it. Alex and I both love Futurama. Death by Snoo. It would be another good way to go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So for me, I'm going to actually be specific on the hallucinogenics. I would say either psilocybin, like the magic mushrooms.
The mushrooms, yeah.
Or ayahuasca. Now, I get that ayahuasca's got, like, you're throwing up stuff and all that. But, go on a whole little spirit journey, maybe. I don't know. I think that's probably what I would do. But that's just me. I think it goes back to like what you were saying about, like Steve Jobs and a lot of other people have kind of talked about maybe there is some potential benefit. It certainly would alter your perspective. And I think the one thing that I've kind of heard, again, we're not advocating it, but I have kind of heard that there's been a lot of claims that it really does help with empathy. And I think if anything, one of the problems that culturally I think we have right now is we have a lack of empathy and understanding for other people. And maybe not the worst thing to help with that.
Yeah, 100%, Ron. And, there's been a lot of research that's being done right now on microdosing of these drugs. So to the point where you're not actually tripping, so to speak. But but there is that level of sort of empathetic feelings and sort of making connections in your brain about past memories. And I know there's a lot of experiments right now being done, even clinically within therapy sessions, during therapy sessions, being on some type of hallucinogenic and having. So it's interesting what will come of it, because that was research that was started in the early 60s, right, like 50s, and then the federal government came in and put the kibosh on that. Yeah, and so now we're like 50 years behind medically from a research standpoint where we should be. So it'll be very interesting when we listen back on this episode 10, 15 years, where the progress is made, and whether there is a more legalization for microdosing or some ability to not necessarily trip to an extreme level, but to experience what we need more of in this world, which is certainly empathy and less. I think what we do have is prescribed painkillers,
right? Where
people are just trying to escape their problems, and maybe they wouldn't be escaping those problems if they had more empathy for others and themselves.
Hey, very good question, Ruben, as always. Next one. This comes from Taylor Lacey.
Ron, Alex, it was a pleasure being on your podcast. Now, this question I have for you is highly debatable, even more so than asking if you're a Republican or a Democrat. My question for you is, if you had to choose between red nacho cheese Doritos or blue Cool Ranch Doritos, which would you choose?
I'm going to have to go with Cool. No, I have to go with the regular, like the original, not Cool Ranch. Not Cool Ranch.
But you wanted to say Cool Ranch first.
I don't know why I wanted to. I think what it was is like.
You think you should go with your gut?
No.
Your gut said Cool Ranch.
No. Like, I always viewed Cool Ranch as kind of like it's the second to the primary. Like, I like the orange gooey, the stuff that you get with
want
Doritos.
That on your fingers.
And you know what's crazy is I've heard that they've done studies like within the company that makes it. The cheese like comes off all those crumbs. It doesn't actually do anything for the flavor. It just in your head it's like something like that. And I'm like, but you're
saying they put extra cheese on it that will specifically stick to your fingers without any taste benefit in and of itself on the chip.
Right, but they found that it's just like and maybe I'm making this up, it's a fever dream. Maybe I'll have Dan try to research it for us, but I'm pretty sure I've heard it somewhere, and they basically found that when they removed it, people's satisfaction with the chips overall just went down. They just were like, nah, not quite as good. Because it's part of that experience. It's like, oh man, I'm having these Doritos, they got that good taste, and look at my fingers. They're all nice and neon fluorescent orange, right? And it's good. I like the original flavor better than the Cool Ranch. Cool Ranch is good, but it's not quite as good. What about you, Alex?
All right. For me, one bag right now, first time I've had Doritos in 2 years, I'm going Cool Ranch. However, if this was you're on a deserted island type scenario and you can have Doritos, one style of Doritos the rest of your life, I'm going nacho cheese. I think nacho cheese is the OG. I think it tastes better. But I like, once in a while, I want to change things up, and I want to go with the Cool Ranch. But I don't think I would eat Cool Ranch full-time on a deserted island. I think after, bag 12, I'd be like, I never want to have Doritos ever again. But I could eat the nacho cheese all day.
By the way, we just got a response from Dan. By the way, thank you, Dan. You're awesome, dude. To powder or not to powder, that is the question. Licking the shocking orange powder off your fingers is part of the Doritos experience. Although it said that Doritos would taste the same without the powder, they just wouldn't be the same. So I think that answers that. So yes,
that makes a lot of sense.
But it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because it is such a tactile experience that comes from them. So, but great question.
Yeah. All right, final questions of the night from our guest, Tim Chubb, episode 14 and 15. And of course, what did he do since he was technically on 2 episodes,
right?
Part 1 and Part 2, he gets 2 questions.
Hey guys, congrats on 50 episodes and 2 great seasons on the podcast. Question I have for you is, if there's one thing you could do to fix the divisiveness that we have in politics, what would it be?
I think it's a very complicated question. And this is why there doesn't seem to be an answer. But I will say 2 things that would absolutely help. 1 being term limits. And number 2, finding a way to eliminate the 2-party system. I think we live in a country where the second you're elected, you are constantly focused on getting reelected. You have to appease your party to get your party's nomination, and then you have to do the general election. And so you're playing this dance, and you're so focused on getting reelected that you're not actually able to focus on doing what's best for the country. And I think we've created this mob mentality where people's identity is associated with their political party. So when I say something negative about Nancy Pelosi, I'm just making someone up, all of a sudden people are going, well, you hate Democrats, therefore you must be a Republican. And it's like, what? Wait. What the hell are you talking about? Right? Like, we're not allowing political discourse anymore. I think you can help those issues by fixing those 2 issues, but I don't think they'll ever happen. Why would a politician want to limit their own ability to stay in the career that they are having a very lucrative time doing?
Yeah,
that's my cynic. The cynic in me says, "Why would you've been in a Senate for 60 years? You're loving it. Why would you say, oh yeah, I don't want people to be a senator for 60 years? They're loving it."
Yeah. To piggyback off of what Alex said, because Alex is definitely much more the poli-sci guy than I am. I would agree 100% about term limits, and then when it comes to the parties, I think that's the problem. Like, political parties are supposed to be really kind of here's a thought process on how we want to maybe approach these different problems. It's not a religion where it's like, I believe in this party and they're going to always have my back because there's the only thing that's right. That's not accurate. I think what maybe would help is, and I know there's definitely been like splintered groups within the past, but man, it would help if there was much more of a perspective of, hey, if you feel very confident that there's this, and you want to break apart, pursue it. I wish there was more of that going on, but I think with what's going on with the 2-party system right now, it's very much everyone's kind of lock and key, where it's...
Well, the Republicans and Democrats are in cahoots with one another, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's like, well, listen, you're my enemy, but at least there's only 2 options, right? It's like there's 2 bars in a town.
Right.
They would work together to stop a 3rd bar from coming into town. It's like, hey, listen, You're getting some patrons, I'm getting some patrons, but the last thing we want is for someone to our pie to get split up even more.
Right.
So Republicans and Democrats, that's the one thing they work together on, is to eliminate the possibility of a 3rd party from being a serious, viable candidate. And that's really sad because that is eliminating a true democracy. A true republic in this country is being prevented because the Republicans and the Democrats, that's the one thing they're happy to work together.
All right.
And not only that, when they're working together on it, they get all of us all wrapped up on it. And so then all of a sudden, we're all wrapped up around their finger and we go, oh, I'm a Republican. Oh, I'm a Democrat. Right? And those people over there on the other side, they're whatever, right? They're evil, right? They're a communist. They're a fascist. They're anarchist. It's like, you don't even understand what those, most Americans don't even understand what those words mean.
No.
But it sounds scary. Sure does.
Yeah.
Hey guys, congrats on 2 great seasons of the podcast. Question I have for you is, Elon Musk, how's he remembered?
I've seen this means once he's dead 40 years from now, whatever, 50, well, I don't know. Whenever he's dead, how will he be remembered by the world?
I think he'll be remembered as one of the early guys who colonized Mars, and I know that's been something that he's been pushing for. I would love that to be what he actually achieves, and if that is the case, I could see. I mean, colonization is not an easy thing. I mean, I think we've all probably seen the movie The Martian, and I get The Martian is not accurate about everything, but there's a lot of possibilities of things that could go wrong. If anything were to ever happen to him, I think that, and he was on Mars, I could see that being his legacy, is that he planted the first steps to really help with pushing it forward. I mean, granted, I don't think he's going to be the first person on Mars, but I think he's going to be maybe somebody who would have a lot of the initial investment, the initial, we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we move society forward. So that would be my guess. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him briefly on this show before. I think Elon Musk is one of the most important minds living today. I do think he is also someone who has a serious God complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he probably has a lot of mental issues. I think he will be remembered as someone who makes serious contributions in the way that we travel, in the way that we treat the environment. But I think he will end up with a Howard Hughes type memory, which is, you know, a lot of people say, oh, and Howard Hughes, incredibly powerful, influential to the world, one of the most important people of the 20th century. But the guy was crazy. I mean, especially in the last few years of his life. I mean, he went off the reservation. Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't important. Doesn't mean he wasn't influential. I mean, Howard Hughes impacted aviation. He impacted the film industry. He had a lot of contributions that we all benefit from today. But I think there's always going to be that sort of like asterisk by Howard Hughes' name, like, oh, that guy was an eccentric billionaire. And I think that level of eccentricness will be tied with Elon Musk as well. But, you know, there is something to be said about the people who change the world usually are a little off their rocker. You know, I don't think Steve Jobs was a saint by any means, but he did change the world. I think Elon Musk will be remembered in centuries from now. He will be one of the most well-recognized people from the 21st century. But there's going to be that asterisk, which was, oh my God, he had a God complex. He had how many children, how many different women, and there were all these weird scandals and all these things. I can't even keep track of them right now. And he's still in his relatively young life. He's got more years ahead of him. Do I think he's going to get less crazy, or do I think he's going to get more crazy? I'm going to guess he's going to get more crazy. So, super important figure, but I think he's going to have like a Howard Hughes type memory.
Well, and I think, especially now, I think there is a certain hypersensitivity to everyone's social and like all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And I think that, at least in the case of Elon Musk, I think that all of his dirty laundry is going to come out. I mean, shoot, if you had anything to do with him in a possible way that is, you know, a little bit scandalous, all those are going to come out. They're going to be made for TV movies, you name it. Just because that's kind of where we're at now. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but I think his dirty laundry is going to become very clear even before he passes. But then again, we go back to, even like we were talking about, like Alexander Hamilton. He certainly was another person who had a ton of dirty laundry that all came out. And, you know, they're still remembered. So I think that, yeah, I think just like Howard Hughes, just like Steve Jobs, every one of them's flawed. But all of those flaws also relate to a little bit about who they are. And I think that also gives us a little bit of room to pause to say, yeah, even though I'm also flawed, I can still achieve and do great things because we've seen so many in the past that have done that.
I will say this about Elon, and I know Tim can be very critical of Elon, and well-deserving for the most part. I will say this. We found out tomorrow, made-up scenario. We find out tomorrow there is a massive asteroid that is going to hit Earth and going to annihilate everyone. and we have 2 years to plan for it, 2 years to come up with a solution, who would I want to be working on it to figure it out?
Elon.
I would say Elon Musk is our best chance. I mean, the guy is a lunatic, and from what I understand, he can be a complete asshole to his employees. But the guy gets stuff done. He does, right? So I don't know if there's anyone else on this planet right now that I would rather entrust. This is going to sound crazy, that I'd rather entrust the world to when it comes to the fate of humanity. I think he'd be the guy.
Well, with that, I think that was a great question, by the way, Tim. And I think with that, Alex and I, on behalf of all of us, and thank you also, Dan, for your help this season. I think we all want to thank you as our listeners for supporting us and encouraging us and just giving the show a chance, and really also just helping us, and especially all of our guests too. I know that this season we've definitely broadened and expanded the amount of guests that we've had and really the scope of everything. And this has been a fun journey, and we're continuing to grow, and we're looking forward to season 3. And hopefully during our little hiatus, we're going to maybe release some specials this time. But it's been a fun episode and a fun season, so thank you all. And with that,
yeah,
we'll end.
I was going to say I completely agree with Ron. I think Ron and I need some much-needed time off to kind of recharge the batteries, and we'll come back season 3, hopefully even better. I will say, if you are listening, have questions, have ideas, hell, maybe you want to be a guest, let us know. When the time comes when we get this going again, we would love to bring on more people with more diverse backgrounds. And I know so many people think to themselves, I don't have anything interesting to say. There's one thing, and I should have mentioned this during some of those questions. There's one thing I've learned, in addition to everything I've already mentioned throughout this process, is everyone's got a fascinating story. Everyone does. Everyone has a history, an interest that makes them who they are, helps them operate and tick the way they do. And we can all learn from one another. Kind of going back to that drug question. We can all learn from each other without having to take drugs. All right? I believe that. So hopefully we're helping that one episode at a time. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you for our sponsor, Malort. And we will officially close out season 2.